Hey guys, Big Daddy and I are in West Point today, and we're going to explore and take a look around. We're standing across the street from Cox's drugstore, that store right there. Cox's drugstore was the first drugstore in West Point. Come along with us, let's go explore. This wrought iron sign marks what was once the center of the new community of West Point. Somewhere around 1837, a little white wood frame store was built on the corner of the Columbus-Houston Road and White Road. Indians would race up and down White Road, and local citizenry would watch and take part in the races. Okay guys, let's have a look around Confederate Park in downtown West Point and look for the cornerstone for the original City Hall. West Point is located in Clay County, Mississippi. Clay County was once called Colfax County from 1871 to 1876. This is the cornerstone of White Hall, West Point's first city hall. You can get much information about City Hall off the cornerstone. You also notice the little depression in the center. It served as a time capsule for a while, but all the information was destroyed in the fire in the 1890s. It sits this close to the courthouse today, and you look out toward Confederate Park. Actually, that was City Hall, not the courthouse. The new Clay County Courthouse sits a couple blocks away. Now we're looking out through Confederate Park, and I'm going to take in the Confederate Monument. I think this monument has some of the most intricately detailed soldiers on it that I have ever seen. It's almost as if their pants legs could blow in the wind. Of course, this monument is dedicated to the soldiers from Clay County that fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War. I know there's been some discussion about perhaps more appropriate modern day placement for the monument, but I for one hope they don't destroy it, because I think it's, well, one of my favorites. Now let's move down the street a bit and look at the south end of Kellogg's hardware store. Kellogg, by the way, is a neat little hardware store, but right here was located the first bank in West Point. The First National Bank of West Point was organized in January of 1883. It seems another bank was attempted in 1871, but by 1872 there's no documentation that explains that it still existed. The First National Bank moved from Kellogg's Hardware to across the street and up toward the corner somewhere around 1883. It's the oldest national bank in Mississippi. You think election celebrations getting out of hand are a new thing? Well, let's go down the street here a bit and let me tell you one of my favorite stories from the day. In 1892, Grover Cleveland was elected president, and this excited the locals to a point that they all decided to meet in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, which you see here. This home used to be that church, and they gave speeches and decided to have a torchlight parade. There was as many as 100 torches making their way through the streets to about this spot. The locals gathered up in front of what was once the Coleman House, and they gave many more celebratory speeches and such, and the crowd decided, well, it was time to go home, so they started to disperse, but some old soldiers drug up an old celebration cannon that they fired whenever a Democrat was elected, and they loaded it up with a double shot of powder, and boom, it exploded in the streets. It hurt many local citizens, one being the most immediate former mayor had both his legs broken. Citizens scurried around town to find the 3 local doctors and gathered hurt people up and took them into Rose's drugstore. Rose's was called the Cook and Ellis drugstore at the time. Big chunks of cannon have flown for hundreds of yards in each direction. The gallery of the old hotel had been ripped away by the blast. I love these old machines. For a small amount of money, you could get your future told and your character, I suppose, evaluated, but mostly you got your weight. As you move down Main Street, you see where the first National Bird Dog Field Trial was held. That's a big deal to those in the bird dog business. I enjoy walking down Main Street looking at all the old buildings. At one point during the 50s and 60s, this old building was a bank. Not sure if that was its original use. The upstairs portion of this building was West Point's Opera House. The dressing rooms were on either end, and the stage was in the center, and it was heated by a couple of pot-belly stoves. We're now walking down what is known as Lawyers Row. These old homes you see to your left were probably residences of early citizens, but for many years they've been, lawyers' offices. I think they're a really pretty section of downtown and just have a neat look and feel about them. If you need legal representation in West Point, I suppose this is the place to come. Now we're going to talk about the Bryan brothers and the impact they had on early West Point history, and we're going to move around downtown just a wee bit more and then have a look at some of the homes of the early citizens of West Point, and finally make our way to Greenwood Cemetery. You can't talk about West Point and not mention Bryan Foods. This is the last Bryan Foods meatpacking plant located in town, and at one time it employed thousands. If you've been in a grocery store in the southeastern or eastern United States, you've seen Bryan Foods meats. They were taken over by Sara Lee Corporation, and eventually Sara Lee shut down its West Point operations. This is the old Cottrell Livery Stable, built in 1892, and at one point it had some real strong ties to Mossy Oak camouflage folks. This is the George McDermott home. It was built sometime between 1860 and 1862, and it was West Point's first hospital. The construction on the Henley House began in 1869, and it's had a collection of notable people that lived within its walls over the years. The Arthur Hudson Strode lived here as a child. Walt Gregory, the United States Attorney General under Woodrow Wilson, lived here for a time. And also, Larry Seaman, a movie star, was born here. This is the home known as Elmview. It was built in 1852 by George and Lucy Brame and was enlarged several times by successive owners over the years. It served as a Confederate field hospital. And oh yeah, you'll meet George and Lucy in just a moment. This home was built in 1917, but it's the site of John G. Baptist's log home, which was built in 1860. He was the first mayor of West Point. You'll also get to meet him in just a few moments when we visit Greenwood Cemetery. This home was built in 1852 by Moses Jordan. He was one of the OG citizens of West Point, certainly an influential civic leader during the founding moments of this city. I believe a former mayor lives there now, and it's one of my favorite homes in the city. In February of 1870, George Brame sold this property to be used as a cemetery on the condition that his wife Lucy be buried here. Well, here George and Lucy are, just to the right of the main gate. Moses Jordan's grave is a bricked over grave that's been sort of lost to time. This is the grave of John G. Baptist, the first mayor of West Point. Remember, he's the guy that had the log cabin on the side of that house that we looked at earlier. One wonders what kind of political strife he encountered. This is the grave of R.C. Beckett. He was a prominent lawyer and moved to West Point in 1871. He was a successful attorney, and of course it is said that he had phenomenal memory with unrelenting tenacity combined with skill and pleading that helped him earn an almost invariable success when taking on a case. He did preside over a limited number of cases, so he was tagged with the moniker of judge. Judge Beckett passed away on April the 21st, 1921. Next, we're going to move to the grave of his law partner, Judge Frank Critz Sr. I'm guessing Judge Critz has to be the reason there's a Critz Hall at Mississippi State University today. Judge Critz was a Confederate veteran and graduated from University of Mississippi and moved to West Point in 1872. He was chancellor of the 6th Chancery District from 1880 to 1888. He was also a candidate for governor of the state of Mississippi in 1899 and 1903, but was defeated both times. He and his partner, R.C. Beckett, won a $1.5 million lawsuit against the Yazoo, Mississippi Railroad. This railroad later became the Illinois Central Railroad. The railroad was sued for back taxes, and after 4 years or so of work, the verdict awarded the state treasury the money to build the state capitol building, located in Jackson, Mississippi. Here we have a collection of unknown Confederate graves from the Civil War. These men, of course, served in the Confederate Army and were moved here, somewhere around 84 of them total, after the various battles, probably mostly because West Point was located on the railroad. Probably a couple of them even came from the little skirmishes that locals referred to as the Battles of West Point. This is the grave of Phineas Cook Jr. He died in 1819. He was originally buried in Churchill Cemetery, which is basically just up the road a bit. These markers you see in this section of Greenwood Cemetery were moved here from Churchill Cemetery and, if I remember right, the old Cannon Cemetery. Remember, guys, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, Big Daddy and I would like to invite you to come to West Point and visit for yourself sometimes. There's so many things we just didn't get to in this video. There are many good places to eat. There's the railroad history, the history of the religious institutions, and many other events in civic life that we just didn't touch. Nonetheless, we hope you've enjoyed West Point. Thank you.